Hey everyone, welcome to episode 3 of Mistakes Were Made. Firstly, thank you everyone for taking the time to reach out and say hi. When you do these, I've mentioned it before, it's weird. You kind of record it and then you send it out into the ether and then it's like, did anyone listen to it? And people are listening to it, so thank you. I've also been really thrilled to just hear from people. So hear what they got out of it, hear areas that I can improve, hear their own thoughts on the topic. I've heard just all sorts of different stories. There's so much more. Every episode, I feel like I could get 10 more episodes out of the feedback, which is awesome. Thank you. Because I know it takes time. It takes time to listen to these things, and it also takes time to give that feedback. So I really appreciate that. The other thing as well is I like hearing how these episodes kind of help you think about your own journey. And I acknowledge that some of what's in here might also be a little challenging at times. So with the radical candor stuff and talking about the Clifton strength stuff, sometimes those come up in hard parts of your career. So I appreciate that. I really appreciate the feedback on those things, and that sometimes the growth hurts and sometimes the mistakes come at a higher price and cost. So thanks for sharing those stories with me. I really do appreciate it. So one of the challenges with putting this together is coming up with the ideas. So I've got a lot of ideas. And then the next thing is coming up with how those ideas can be best expressed. So what sort of conversations, what sort of guests? That's pretty tricky. And then figuring out who I could talk to about those things is really tricky. So I spend a lot of time reaching out to people, saying hi, trying to rebuild parts of my network that I haven't spoken to for a long time. It's pretty tricky, which is why this podcast is a little delayed. But every now and then, a couple of things land on your plate that are pretty well thrashed out. And that's really how a lot of this episode came together. I was on Substack, which is something I'm fairly new to, and I was reading a few different articles and posts, and I came across Rhody's articles. Now, Rhody's someone who I first met at the dawn of my career, and it's kind of funny that like every 5 years, Rhody and I seem to cross paths. And then the last time I spoke to Rhody was in 2019, so we're about due for that 5-year check-in. But Rhody did a whole bunch of great posts, but one of them stood out as somewhat unique and crossed some of the ideas that I had in my list. And she was gracious enough to give me some time to do prep for this episode and also to record it. So big shout out to Rhody. So in this episode, we're going to cover a whole bunch of topics, and some of them might be things that some of you haven't really thought about before, or may open up a context that you just weren't aware of. For instance, we start off the conversation with this idea that the more senior you become, the more your presence, tone, and behavior ripple through the team. So Rhody speaks to that in this article, talking about as your light grows brighter, your shadow grows longer. And I just liked that. I thought it was really clever. So we talk about that. We talk about the trap of being helpful. Rhody was really cool to share some stories and some of the challenges she's had in her career, including the story of when she went on leave. And when she came back, she was told by her leadership, hey, you've dumbed down your team. I love that conversation. And it was really, really insightful to some of the things that we do in leadership or as individual contributors that can slow us down. So I enjoyed that. We had a really good discussion on something that I have always tried to put a lot of focus into, and that's the culture of transparency, but the challenge of that. And we don't want to be oversharing because that can create confusion and stress and anxiety within a team. So that was cool. Really, really good insights in there. And something that people may not have ever heard of or thought of is that leadership is lonely. Rhody shared a story that really was hard on her when she went through it. There was an experience where she wasn't part of the gang anymore, wasn't invited to a dinner when she was early in a particular leadership role. So that whole challenge around peer dynamics and that shift into leadership can be really quite challenging. So we talk to that. We talk about that. We talk about psychological safety. I think that that's something that we need to talk a lot more about, especially when we're building an early culture of a company. We need to define what that culture looks like and need to make sure that there's space for conversations. We talk about hiring and making sure you don't hire a clone of yourself. And lastly, how you can stay grounded as a leader. I think that's something else that I'd like a lot more people to be talking about. So there's a ton in this episode. The episode I don't think is purely for leaders or early in career leaders. I think this episode is for everyone. My goal with this podcast is to help people move into leadership, but it's also to help people early in that journey to get some context for what leadership looks like. So if that is something in your career path, you can have a little bit more insight. But also for those of you that are individual contributors, I think it's really important that you understand how leadership works, how your boss or people senior to you in the company work and how the day-to-day affects them and affects you. I think that's really important insight that can help you with your own career growth. So there's an absolute ton in here. Once again, thank you so much for listening. There's a lot here. Have a listen. And once again, please let me know. Text me, LinkedIn, message, smoke signals, whatever. Send me messages. I really, really, really love hearing from everyone. And I really love those insights that you get out of this. What did you agree with? Is there things in here you don't? I am very confident that Rhody would also love the feedback as well. So shoot her a note. I think she'd get a real kick out of it. So with that, I'll roll the episode. So Rhody, you and I have met like every 5 years, it feels like, through both of our careers, which is my little fun fact. And I was thinking about this a few days ago, that we first met on the VMware V-Champions program. It dawned on me, which is like a few years ago. Let's not date ourselves. So that was kind of fun to be like, I was thinking about like, oh, we've both been in that ecosystem in this industry for a really long time. And I think both of us have sort of climbed that ladder in a similar way, going through some very different companies, some startups, some very traditional companies. So I'm super excited about this episode because I think some of our context is going to be somewhat similar, but also some of it will be very different. So that's going to be fun. I thought when I was reading your Substack, and we'll give a little post to that because I think it's really cool what you're doing. You wrote an article and it says, "Beware the shadow you cast." And I went, boom, that's a whole episode, and reached out to you. So big thank you for coming on this journey with me. So we've got a lot to talk about, but maybe before we throw into that, who are you, Rhody? Quick intro for the people.
Awesome. No, it's interesting you bring up the early days of VMware because I will date myself. I've been in the industry for nearly 30 years now. I turned 50 a couple of weeks ago. My depth, I always talk about breadth and depth being so important in just skill sets in general. So my depth is in partnerships. So I build ecosystems, I transformed them, I run them, and particularly now in that cloud and AI world. So I've been in traditional world as well as in a modern world. So that's my depth. I've always been in partnerships roles. And my breadth comes from just the range of companies that I've worked for. So different sizes, different stages, different technologies. And fun fact for me, I have recently been diagnosed as neurodivergent. And so one of the things that is wonderful about that is I now realize why I'm so good at pattern recognition. And so I take all of the learnings from the various different stages and companies that I've worked for and tie all that together. So I think ecosystem orchestration is a new term, I guess, that people are using for partnerships and alliances.
There's so much to unpack there. The ADD thing and being neurodivergent is really interesting because I do think of my brain as a machine, and it's really fun to do research and understand how your machine works.
Yeah.
And I want to explore that as a topic with a bit of a brains trust. So you've just volunteered yourself for that episode.
Absolutely.
It's super exciting. There's a lot of people in my world that are going through that process at the moment and coming out of it like, oh, this is a superpower. So very, very cool.
Mate, it is totally a superpower. And I think what is interesting, I'm part of what they're calling or starting to call the lost generation. And it is particularly women who have children that are getting diagnosed. Now we're learning that it's hereditary. I didn't know that. And so they're saying that this group of women in particular are the lost generation because it shows up differently in women. And a lot of us were just not diagnosed. Like you, I think of my brain as external to me, which apparently is a trait of ADHD. But I've always seen that the way I think is different and it's a superpower. I just can now understand the why. So I would love to come and talk about that.
We've got to do it.
Yeah.
There's a few other people that I want to pull into this and do like a little panel. I think that'd be great. So anyway, let me figure that out. That'll be fun. So you're probably looking back on your career now with this understood superpower, probably going, oh, a few things now make sense. Has that bubbled up? Are you now looking at going, oh, that issue, that company, that result, good or bad, now makes a bit more sense?
Oh, absolutely. I think that one of the things that it's probably been a pattern throughout my
Mm,
career is that I'm always looking for the future opportunity. And sometimes I see something with such clarity that taking people on the journey has been something that I've really had to learn to do because typically a common question I get is, Rhody, where's your data to support that? Now, if you're in a field role or if you're trying to transform a business and grow, looking backwards at data is not always helpful, right? Like you have to try things and iterate, and you might not always get them right. But looking back, I've realized that my pattern recognition is why I've been able to see future things so clearly. But if you can't take people on the journey, it doesn't matter. And then you get frustrated, they get frustrated. And so I've just had to learn over the years, how do I get the data? It might be in my 30 years of experience, but the place I am now, they're looking for data in this company. And so, yeah, I've had to really learn, okay, if they don't get it, maybe I'm wrong, self reflect, or how do I take them on the journey to at least try something? So, yeah, that would definitely be a key thing that I've had to learn.
yeah. It's funny. Early in my career, there was an arrogance to me. All my friends are laughing now. Um, around just knowing I was right about something, but not having the tools to articulate it. So it would come across, and often I was. My friends are still laughing. Um, but yeah, not having that tool to articulate, okay, I believe this to be the case. I can't quite articulate why. I'm trying to put together proof points, or I'm trying to articulate it, and I think these days it's a little bit different. You can leverage metrics, stories, experience, but actually my favorite thing is just working with people to let them figure it out. I don't have to be right. I can just have a gut feeling, take people on a journey, and if we land in the same place, great. If we don't, hopefully I've learned something. So that's
Yeah.
my take on it now that I'm sort of got this grey hair thing going on. So it's been a fun journey.
I think, though, what is interesting, I've also learned your playbook from yesterday is not just transferable to where you are today. And sometimes it can be a blind spot. And I love that comment, like, I'm often right. And I love that. And that's, like a great confidence in your experience. At the same time, you have to actually come into a situation and think, okay, I've got my playbook, but I'm going to listen and learn because is it new technology?
Yeah,
Is it a new team?
yeah,
Is it a new culture?
yeah,
And then you get out your playbook to connect the dots. Because I think you and I've spoken about this. If you collaborate and listen first, your playbook or your right might actually be different than what you thought in the beginning. But
absolutely.
if you think your playbook is just, like repeatable without listening and learning, man, it
Yeah.
is very frustrating when you work with people that aren't willing to stop and listen first.
It was a hard habit to break. It was about a decade ago. And for a few years, I had seek first to understand,
I
like
love that.
on my computer right in front of me. Whereas it's like MacBook, it was like seek first to understand to break that habit because there was an arrogance to it. Like, oh, I've seen this before, so it must be true. No, the world's different. Things are different. Experiences are different. So let's segue. You've been doing the Substack thing. I've been really enjoying your posts. Congratulations
Thank
on
you.
keeping the cadence going too. I'm really impressed by that as someone who's trying to even do this on a strong cadence. A couple of your articles just popped out at me, and the one that really popped out was "Beware the shadow you cast." And there's a couple of themes I wanted to unpack because you write very honestly around things that people in senior roles may be starting to understand or understand, but not maybe feel a bit alone. And also people that are aspiring to be in leadership or trying to figure out their leadership themselves might find really interesting. So I'm going to read the quote. As your light grows brighter, your shadow grows longer. And I went, ooh, that's interesting. So, Rhody, what does that mean? Give me the details here.
Yeah, I just think what I've learned is when your visibility increases, so whether that be your role, your title, a different company, your shadow gets bigger. And so what I mean by that is the shadow that you cast, whether it is that if you're stressed, if you are holding yourself to really, really high standards, whether you're frustrated, how you actually show up to your team, they start to mirror your behaviors. And so I think that, for me, beware the shadow you cast. It's be mindful of your own blind spots. Be mindful of the impact your energy actually has on your team members, because you influence a lot more, not just with your words, but how you show up. And so for me, the shadow is almost the undertones of not what you're saying, but how you show up and how your energy actually transpires across to the rest of your team.
And it's such an interesting thing to start thinking about. I look at how I've showed up for my teams, and I can even almost pinpoint the point in my career as a leader where I went, oh, hang on, you need to be careful here because you're allowed to have bad days, but that can really throw a team sideways. And I have a distinct memory of that from probably, again, about a decade ago, where we were just going through some tough times, really, really major deal. Really great customer to work with, but it really challenged us, and it was super stressful. There was a lot going on, and I think back to that moment, going that the team I had around me watching me go through that would have been eye opening for them.
Yeah,
But then
absolutely.
I always wanted that really healthy balance of transparency and them seeing what was going on and not being a wall. So that's a really hard thing to have, where you're masking a little bit, but also trying to be transparent. Did you find that? Did you find that that was hard to get right?
Oh, absolutely. I don't think I've solved it, Carlo. I think that sometimes I catch myself going into that. And I think that, especially being neurodivergent,
Mm,
oversharing is very common, right? And so I have a tendency to overshare. I also truly believe the more transparent you are with your team, the more they can understand the why if you're asking them to do something. But I think there's that fine line of, is it helping them or is it self-serving that I feel better because I'm oversharing some of the challenges that I'm going through, and, similar to your example. And I think, how do I make sure that I am sharing without causing stress? And, like, just depending on your situation at the time, it's a really, really fine line. It's a
yeah.
really fine line.
It's challenging too. I've been lucky enough to have teams where you go from really juniors, so people that are early in their career who are amazing, but they just haven't had the years of experience to kind of read the room
Yeah,
and understand some of the company dynamics, all the way to very seniors. And what I found interesting was, as you go through the ranks, people have a different way of taking what you're throwing out there. They have a different way of understanding, okay, hang on a minute, he's stressed, or, oh my goodness, it's the end of the world, the boss is having a bad day. I don't know if you've had that experience with that sort of variety of people in your teams.
definitely. I think you've actually just triggered something I hadn't planned on talking about here today, but I really believe that you've got to adapt your leadership style to the individuals in your team. And that could be based on experience. Someone more junior probably needs a little bit more direction and wants a little bit more direction. But you may have some very, very senior people in your team that really just need you to be there as a sounding board. They've got high standards. They know what to do. And your leadership style with them is very, very different than it might be with the more junior person. I think too, talking about neurodiversity, depending on even the personalities of your team, right? So an introvert versus an extrovert might need a different style from you. Or if you've got someone in your team who's very literal, I've found I can say one sentence to someone and they'll take it the way I intended it. But a very literal person, I have to be really mindful that they might think this means oh, the world's falling down, so I have to be more deliberate with my language. And so, yeah, I just think good leaders, you have to adapt your style depending on so many factors.
I think you and I have both led regional teams, so across India, Asia Pacific, and Japan. And I think your comment there shows because you have that challenge around language, and language is malleable. And you got the cultural challenges around how Australians communicate versus how the Japanese or the Chinese or the Indians will just describe work and talk and communicate. So that's another gotcha I find is when you're communicating and when you're having that moment or you're having that interaction, you could have a call with, especially here in Australia, there's so much diversity in the workforce here. You could have that call and 5 people from different cultural backgrounds, or English might be their second language, will take it 5 different ways. It's really made me appreciate just how we communicate, especially us Aussies. We have a way, don't we?
Yeah. Oh, it's funny you bring that up because this is my first APJ role. I had my own glass ceiling. Kids were younger. I just didn't want to be out of the country as much. And now, I guess, in this day where a lot of our calls are Zoom calls, I'm very collaborative. And I remember my first team meeting, I had my Korean team, Indian team based in Singapore, team based in Japan. Now, Aussies aren't backwards in coming forwards, right? So when you say, hey guys, what do you think about that? Or, I'd love some feedback. I actually found, well, it's the Aussies that are speaking up, or the team in India, actually, I find are very similar to Aussies in that way as well. I had to change my style because there were other parts of Asia that don't respond well to that kind of leadership. So I've learnt that the hard way in the last 4 years.
Have on more than one occasion given international guests a disclaimer or a primer maybe around Aussies. Like, okay, if you think we're whinging, we're not. We're engaged. And that's good. So there's a
When the
couple of
Aussies are
people.
quiet, there's a problem,
There's a
right?
problem. And I've had a couple of really amazing people from the US and from Europe. Like, oh. And then months later, okay, that was really helpful. Thank you for that, because we have our quirks down here in the sun, don't we? There's
I'm
a
gonna
few little
steal that tip.
nuances.
Yeah,
Yeah, it
that's
works
a
great.
really,
It
really
works
good tip.
great. Yeah. It works great. So there was a couple of things in your article, and I'm leaning on that article because I just think it was just so well written, but also just really hit a couple of the points that I had in my Carlo would like to talk about list. And one of them was, I mean, you describe it. I'll just quote you. It's easier. You mentioned once being told you dumbed your team down. And it's such an honest reflection for you to go out there. So that's why I'm really enjoying your writing, because you're just so honest about this stuff, which is kind of the idea of this podcast. So tell me about that dumbed your team down feedback, because there's so much there. Like, that's not fun
Yeah.
feedback.
Oh, mate, do you know that really hit hard, I've got to say. So it was, probably 5 or so years ago, and I was taking the most time off that I'd ever had. I was going to a friend's wedding in Europe. My husband was turning 50, and I was taking, I think it was 4 or 5 weeks off. And my boss, who's fantastic, said, I want you to disengage. Like, I'll take the lead, delegate everything, but I want you to truly switch off. And first of all, fantastic leadership. So, it is such great advice to anyone in your team. And I thought that I'd really prepared. This team member was managing this OKR, etc. And I had a high performing team, Carlo. Like, this was a team of driven, hungry, experienced people. We loved the company we were working for. And one of my favorite things was how well we all collaborated with each other. Um, what I realized, though, when I came back and I was given that feedback, my availability had actually become their safety net. And what I didn't realize is, and by the way, these are all high performing, capable people, but I made it so easy for them to ring and ask what I thought. And my, I guess, immediate reaction was to tell them. And I think that was where that feedback came in, because my boss said when I was away, he said, Rhody, they rang me for things that I'm like, why are you calling me? Make a decision. Why do you need my opinion on this? And yeah, that was where the comment came from. He said, Rhody, you've dumbed them down. Like, they're calling me for things that they should have just made a call on. There was no right or wrong. And so, mate, that honestly hit me so, so very, very hard. And now I've had to really learn, don't necessarily give your opinion. I created a doc, much like your planning doc that you said for people coming in region, of just great open-ended questions. And I swear I had to pull it up because I love solving problems. Quite often what they brought me, I had experience in, and so I loved it, but it wasn't helpful for them. It was almost disempowering them.
You know, there's going to be a lot of sales engineers listening to this, nodding, going, yeah, there was a moment in my career where I had that hard moment in a similar vein. And I'll give you an example. When you go through the motions of being technical, especially if you've worked in infrastructure, systems operations, support, your job is to have the answers, and people call you for those answers. And when
Yeah.
you shift to being a sales engineer early on, you're like, oh, I've trained on this product and I love my product and I have the answers. And I remember the meeting and that the customer asked a question. I immediately was like answering, oh, the product is this, 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 this. And the sales guy's basically kicking me under the desk. And we had a heart to heart in the car park afterwards. And it was a moment of like, why are you interrupting the customer to ask all these questions? You want them to share with you. What are they doing? You want to ask questions, get more out of them. And that for me was a massive shift that came at the right time as I was moving into leadership. That holds true now. That
Yeah.
burning desire, though, to answer all the questions is really hard to overcome. So I'm really impressed you've got that cheat sheet, because we have to give people space. Otherwise, we can't take a day off, can we?
Well, the crazy thing as well, I've got, there's an absolute rock star who was working for me and up until quite recently, and very, like imaginative and creative person. What I've found is that some of the ideas that I've had, he just made better. And then I would come in. And so, asking questions and bouncing things off one another. There's a particular playbook that I've taken into almost every company, but this guy made it better. And I don't know if I would have been part of how it got amplified if I'd just said, here's the playbook, roll it
Yeah, you
out.
wouldn't have.
It
Yeah.
was, here's the framework. What do you think? And I learned during that process. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it actually
Yeah.
benefits you as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. You need to have a check on your ego, and you need that humility to come in and say, all right, here's a thing. Let's beat it up. Let's try it. Let's improve it. It's open.
Absolutely.
I like cultures where that's the norm, but not all cultures have that. And the last year, I've been doing a lot of just reading around how you structure cultures around some of freedom and responsibility, which is a big thing that was in the Netflix founders book. If people haven't read that, read it. It's eye-opening. It's interesting. I'm not saying I love all of it, but that's a culture of giving people the freedom, giving them responsibility, but there's consequences. But then there's other cultures that are very controlling. And I think the idea that you can say, okay, cool, here is a body of work or a framework, or here is the starting point. Let's tear it apart. Let's make it better. I think is a really healthy culture to be in, because
Absolutely.
everyone's going to be contributing. Everyone's going to grow. Everyone has space. And again, you can take time off without freaking out.
But I think
So
that's a
yeah,
really good point though, Carlo, because I think recognizing what is important to you, I bet you purposely choose companies where you can see that culture and you can foster
absolutely.
that culture. And so I'm very much like you. I love that collaborative kind of environment. Not every company has that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's also an arc where organizations will have that in a division or have that and then have to wind it back and forward, which is totally normal. And I also think that culture can exist within teams. I think a strong leader
Definitely.
can make that part of their team's DNA. You shouldn't wait for permission to do that if it's not something that's ingrained in the wider culture. Because companies are huge. There's no such thing as a company-wide culture. I was going to
Great.
pause. Some companies did it back in the day, but I think it's kind of gone now. I think it's really hard to do.
I think it's interesting. I'd love your take actually on the term psychological safety, because I sometimes see eye rolls when I talk about psychological safety. It doesn't mean not being accountable. It means providing a safe space for people to try things and fail, but they know what they are accountable for. And so, yeah, I'd love your view on it. Like, that's what I hear you're talking about, is creating
Yeah,
a psychologically safe environment for your team.
absolutely. It's something that I started to worry about quite a while ago, especially when you look across all of a region, because you could see as an organization grows that different teams would split off, either aligned to their region or aligned to that leader. And you could see it, this is a very long time ago, but you could see it in some teams where experimentation was great and the performance was really good, but that freedom and responsibility was anchored under, at the end of the day, I got your back. It's going to be fine. Go make some mistakes. And you could look at the performance of those teams. You could look at their attainment. You could look at their performance. You could look at their output. And it was always really high. Whereas you look at other teams where everything was micromanaged, the attrition was really high. They just weren't having a good time.
Yeah.
And you'd all come together for like a sales kickoff, or you'd come together for something, and everyone would be in their pockets because those teams just weren't culturally aligned. Actually, that's as simple as that. So I put a lot of effort in my orgs around that psychological safety, and that extends to people at different points of their career being able to co-contribute. That is, I want people outside of their culture to have a go into interacting with others under that safety net of, you're not going to make a faux pas, you're not going to embarrass yourself, we're all learning, and part of that is because I can model that myself. I'll rock up and say, hey, I'm going to make some mistakes, just call me out. And hiring people that embrace that, and getting called out by people in cultures where normally you wouldn't call out the boss is my metric for that. Like, who's going to call me out? Oh, yep, someone in that more conservative culture, or someone who's come to this organization from a more traditional company calling me out because something could be better. Okay, good. We have some safety. That's the culture I want. And there's a gentleman who ran one of my business units, again, from a more conservative country. Within the first 2 weeks, just level set me on a particular behavior that I was, the way I was interacting with the team. He's like, oh, I think you can make some changes here because that part's not very professional in this culture. And I'm like, this is brilliant. Tell me more.
That's
Tell me more.
fantastic.
And I made the right hire because that person is able to do that. They trust me. They trust that we're not going to sort of be negative towards that attitude. So that's my personal metric for psychological safety, is that everyone can speak, everyone can challenge, and it's just this positive thing. And it's a lot of fun when you land it, but it's pretty hard to get there. I've seen that manifest in a really interesting way where there is a team, it was actually the partner team, just doing a great job, really good job on stage, SCO, awards, amazing results. But there was resentment in other parts of the business because they did not feel supported. And it was actually a mismatch of KPIs
Right?
or a mismatch of OKRs, where that team had really, everything was sensible. You couldn't fault it. All the OKRs, everything was really smart, well put together. But there was a slight mismatch and a lack of understanding on each other's OKRs was probably the biggest issue. And that kind of started to boil. So I intervened with the leaders of those functions and, did a let's have a coffee. This is what I'm seeing, psychologically safe. And the action item was actually just to sit down and go through the OKRs. And I saw what came out of that. It was the most minor of tweaks. What really happened was they were just sharing the why. Okay, these are our OKRs in the channel and partnership team for these reasons. This is what we're driving for. This is our metrics. Oh, right. That makes sense now. We're going to adjust this bit. You adjust this bit. We'll change this behavior. And that all went away really fast. So I've seen that manifest, and you've just got to jump in it. So being that GM or having that thinking to go, hang on a minute, I'm not going to let this fester.
Yeah.
I'm going to just trust that this is a safe environment to do so. These people are all peers. We're all human. can we have a conversation? And I think that conversation started with a, can you help me understand? Because I'm not the smartest person in that room. These were specialists, experts. They're amazing people, but there was just a communications gap. So I'm always encouraging people, regardless if you are a people leader, a technical leader, early in career, go ask those questions in a psychologically safe environment. Just because someone has a senior title, senior role, does not mean they have all the answers. And if they
Absolutely.
think they have all the answers, then that's a scary culture. That for me is always a bit of a worry.
No, I love that. I think that as a leader, that to me is demonstrating true leadership, Carlo,
Mm,
because quite often what you see manifest, unfortunately, in a lot of organizations is if there's that chatter and the team are talking about it, if no one takes it to those other leaders, it might be a blind spot that they don't have that visibility. I had a boss that in one-on-ones kept giving me feedback or asking questions about certain regions. And my spidey senses were, have people been complaining about, the approach? And in the end, I said to my boss, because he used to always say to me, is there anything I can help you with? I said, there's one thing. The next time someone comes to you to complain about partner or the strategy or what's going on, just ask them, what did Rhody say when you raised it with her? And 6 months later, he said, wow, I'm not getting complaints anymore. You've really won them over. And I'm like, no, you just stopped their ability to complain without trying to solve it. And so I love that you took that approach because I've been
yeah,
on the receiving end of people not taking that leadership stance.
yeah,
And people are just people,
yeah,
right?
people.
Just
Yeah,
communicate. We
yeah,
all want good outcomes, hopefully.
yeah, yeah. And it's almost, I feel so many of the corporate challenges I've seen, they're just communication issues.
Totally.
It's just communication issues.
Yeah.
Um, so a slight segue, you spoke about it getting lonelier at the top. And I think this is really interesting because there's going to be people early in their leadership career that are probably still interacting with their teams like their peers. The senior leadership sort of ecosystem, they're starting to learn it. But
Yeah.
then there's this weird point where you sort of drift away from the day to day and kind of gets a bit lonely at times. There's things that you purposely step back from, letting your team, as we spoke about a little while ago, your team go off and do their thing, make the mistakes, figure it out. You get hooked into global teams, global projects, planning OKRs, and it can feel a little lonely. And there's probably a few people on this call, maybe those that haven't made that jump, that are like, whatever, sure, whatever. But I think this is really good for everyone to understand because it'll give you context for what senior leadership is like. But also, as a
Absolutely.
senior leader, it'll point out a couple of things that can be improved. So, this is a long way of coming back to Rhody. What do you mean you're lonely at the top? Surely the executive washroom is nice. You get use of the corporate helicopter. What's going on?
I wish. Um, I think there's a couple of things. Where I've found that is I had been promoted into a leadership role where I was a single contributor. And I think that finding that balance between being peers with people to being the leader, that was really tough at the time because it's really just finding and adjusting what those new relationships should look like. But at the same time, you also don't want to lose friendships. And so I really found that difficult the first time that happened. But more recently, I think when you are a senior leader and you're joining a net new team, particularly as a woman in very male dominated spaces, it's sometimes really lonely because you're building that credibility, you're trying to build relationships, you see that there's relationships that you don't know how strong these other relationships across the leaders are, and your team is not there necessarily to be your friend. You want to build those trusted relationships, but your job is not to necessarily build friendships. Um, One way that it hit very hard, I had a team I was recently in charge of, brought them all in for an offsite, and I found out, Carlo, that the very first night they'd organised a dinner to get together. Now, with people that had previously worked at the company, etc., but I wasn't invited. And I remember being so hurt. It was almost like that childhood being excluded feeling. And I was talking to my husband about it, and he was like, "Babe, it's actually really lovely that they're all getting together. Some of them have known each other for years and haven't met face to face before. You got plenty of time to bond, and dinners, etc." And he was right, but Carlo, it hurt. It was that feeling of like, what?
Why don't they
You want
like
to hang out
me?
with me? But it was just, in that moment, they were friends. I was not their friend. I was their leader. And you now have very deep friendships with a lot of those people, but I'd be lying if I was not. I was hurt.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally get it. I totally get it. I think there's this really funny balance where you want these very great relationships with the people that you're leading and working with, where they can come to you, ask for help.
Yeah.
I've had amazing people come to me for help on projects, help on relationships inside the company. Like, hey, I'm struggling with a person, stuff going on in their personal lives that they need advice or help with. Like, I need to take 6 months off. I need to go do this thing. Someone's sick. So these are all things that you need to have an amazing level of trust with. But on the flip side, there also needs to be that separation where you can step back and focus clearly. And trying to be friends with everyone doesn't do anyone any justice,
It
because
doesn't work.
there's biases involved. There's certainly optics on that can be a real challenge. But also your role is not to be their friend, as you say, but to lead that team, which means your inside has to be also looking at the corporate side, looking at the company side, looking at the goals, looking at the customers. That's hard.
It's
I
hard.
have a whole episode I want to do on this very hard skill, and I've realized it's really not one episode. It's something that I have to go every leader that I talk to go, how do you figure this out? And
It's
my
a thing.
guess
Yeah,
is
I'd love
it's
to see that as
ongoing.
a theme
Yeah,
in your podcast, because
yeah,
I'd love to learn from other people and how they
yeah,
do it. I
yeah,
think what is interesting, it's my mum always gave me some really great parenting advice when my kids were, like, they're in their 20s now. But I remember her vividly saying, "Rhody, you are not their friend. You are their
yep,
parent.
yep,
And if you do a good job when they're adults, you'll actually want to be friends with them." And the reason I bring that in, it's similar in leadership settings, right? It's if you can build that trust and you can demonstrate like value to them and help them be better. Some of the tightest friendships I have are with people that used to work for me or that I have worked for. And I just can't help but connect that nugget of wisdom that my mum gave me in parenting into, well, it works in life. It's not just parenting advice, it works in leadership too.
yeah. I agree with all of that. And yeah, my closest friends are people I've worked with. One of them I hired. The thing that I always say is hire people smarter than me, and that I definitely did, and hired some amazing people. And a couple of us are good mates, and that's worked out quite well for the friendship group. But it's also that just bringing in good people, bringing in people that you can work with, they will also get that. They will also get
Yeah,
that this is the dynamic. And it's funny when you leave an organization and the dynamic changes, there's like the leaving party is always kind of weird, because it's like, all right, so we're mates now. You're not my boss anymore. It's like, okay, good. I'll take that.
excellent,
Yeah.
excellent.
One thing I want to cover off before we wrap up, I've got a couple of things, but it's a couple of different articles, and something I've spoken to others about is, how do you avoid hiring people like yourself? Because this is such a massive trap, and I've seen this unfold in cultures. I think it's a really hard thing to do. So how do you do that? How do you hire people that aren't like you? So obviously you need self-awareness of this. That's a tick.
Yeah. It's
How do you
funny.
do this?
People talk a lot about unconscious bias. I have conscious bias. There's things that I know. It's not unconscious. It's okay. When someone matches my personality, we're instantly going to get energy. I'm very much a builder. And so if I can see people that have built, and I know that having too many of the same people in any one team, it's actually not great. It's not healthy. And I've got things I'm really good at, my superpowers. But Carlo, I also have a lot of blind spots, things that I don't enjoy doing. And so I've really learned the more diversity that you have in your team, and diversity is not a male female, it's diversity of thought, diversity of experience, diversity of the how. And some of the best projects or programs that I've ever been part of have been when it has been a blend of those people. And so I really have to check myself, because if I'm interviewing or hiring people, I know that I will have a conscious bias to a certain type of personality. I really then check myself and take a step back and go, okay, let's be a bit more blended. What are the gaps in the team? What kind of energy do we need? What is the experience that we can all learn from that's going to help us as a team get better?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's know your conscious biases. It's not don't leave them as unconscious. Like, just be really
Bring them out.
self-aware and know them. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have to check myself with that.
Yeah. One of the many things I love about our region and running a regional team, when you have that culture where there is that interaction, and really it's hard to do at scale unless everyone's coming together a lot for, I was going to say sales kickoff, but even that's hard because often there's just so much going on. But if you can do an event where everyone's coming together, like offsites or summits, whatever, it's really fun watching that mix because you can see the diversity in your team that is beyond gender. There's the cultural, there's the early in career, late in career. And I love that mix, especially when you start seeing people working projects together. And
Yeah.
that's what you want. And you can't get that if everyone's the same. And to see projects where you've got someone who's maybe more conservative or been around a while with someone who's early in that career and they start working, you see the knowledge is amazing. People who are early in their career have just got so much fresh knowledge, so much fresh technical education with sales engineering is really common. And then you see the craft of sales engineering for the examples that I've more recently seen come together. It's pretty powerful. I really like it. And you're right, you wouldn't get that unless you're very self-aware of who you're hiring. And being okay to be a little uncomfortable. Like, this person's going to be challenging me, which is what I want. This person, and I always use the throwaway term, hire smarter than you. Smarter is such a funny term because what's smarter mean? But to hire someone that challenges me, hire someone that's got new ideas, hire someone who is going to be such a positive across the team. That's the goal. Very hard to do, but I think it pays off.
Well, one of your other podcast episodes, the classic line "A's hire
Yeah.
A's,
Yeah.
B's hire C's" came out, and in fact,
Yeah.
it triggered me to write a nugget
Yeah.
about that, because I had to redefine what I thought a player was. And so I think that that's the other really kind of key thing to think about is, what do you define as an A player? And it doesn't necessarily mean someone that looks like you. And one of the best lessons that I ever learned around this back in, gosh, it would have been 09, 2010 when I was at VMware, I was asked to take on the leadership role of the Diversity Council. The wonderful lady who was running it got a new role and they asked me to step in. Carlo, when I started learning business benefits of diversity, that was game changing, because when you have diverse teams, again, not just gender, when you have diverse teams, more innovation is driven, better return to shareholders, ideas get sparked. And so I think having that knowledge of diversity isn't just a nice to have. Diverse thinking actually makes you better. And so, yeah, I anchor in that.
Hard to do, but it's worth the effort. It's really
Yeah.
worth the effort. So just conscious of time. So I have one more thing for you, which I'm going to start asking every single person.
Okay.
What are the small habits or rituals that you're using to stay self-aware and stay grounded as a leader? Is there any little thing you do?
Yeah. I think I have started a Sunday reflections
Mm-hmm.
where just in the morning, my husband will typically bring me a coffee, and I try and just spend that time reflecting, not just on work, but just in general. What did I accomplish last week? What am I doing next week to kind of, like help keep me on track? And so I think self reflection is just something that I try and do as often as I can. At the same time, I think that it's just being mindful. I will have a tendency to look inwards. What did I do? What could I have done differently? And those things are phenomenal as long as you're not taking on the weight of being the blame of everything. Right. And so I have to check myself with that. It's having self awareness, reflecting. And I think one of the core values that I live by, and as a partner person, this is really, really something every partner person should think about, is how am I being relevant? How is what I'm doing being relevant to my team, to customers, to partners, etc.? I will ask myself that question before I'm prepping for a meeting, after a meeting. What does that person need or care about? And am I showing up and being relevant to the things that they need? And so that's a core value of mine that, I really live by. But the Sunday Reflections is fairly new.
It. I really like it. I think having that slow down, think about it, review it, plan it. It's amazing. A bit of planning goes a long way. I think that's a theme we'll see up. Even Jeff, who I did the first episode with, would talk about writing his program for the week, executing through the week, and reflecting on a Friday. And that stayed with me until now, because having that time just to go, hang on, did I add value? What value should I have added? What learning do I need to do is incredibly powerful. And just, especially today where we've got so much stuff hitting us, email,
Yeah.
Slack, social media, the social networks, the text messages, the Slack and Salesforce updates. There's so much hitting us just to go, hang on, pause. I'm going to go get a coffee. I'm going to think about it. Where do I spend my time? What do I need to be doing is super powerful. So
Yeah, I
I
don't know
like
if
it.
you've
I like it a lot.
heard of, there's a book called Essentialism that I read when I was at Google, and my entire team bought that book. I've since introduced it. I tell anyone to read this book, and it is basically saying essentialism is the disciplined pursuit of less.
Yeah, right.
Because what you were just talking about, I think we're in this world of yes, yes, more, more, not slowing down, but you can get to the end of the week. What have you actually accomplished? You feel busy, but everything you say yes to, you're saying no to something
Something
else. Be
else.
really intentional with it. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, essentialism is something as well that I really try and practice and make sure that my team is practicing too.
Cool. I will put that in the description because that sounds like something I would enjoy reading. So
I
that's
think you would
excellent.
actually.
Speaking of reading, how do we find you, Rhody? You're on Substack. You've been writing some pretty amazing stuff. How does everyone
I
find you?
am. I thank you for that plug, Carlo. I have been collecting nuggets of gold for the last probably 25, 30 years of the best lessons that either I've learnt the hard way or that a mentor has shared or that I've picked up from a book or from a training course. And I have just written them down. Started off with a book just to remember them. And now they just live in my head, but I've got hundreds and hundreds of these nuggets of gold. And I've had the intention to write a book for years. And the thing I love about Substack, every week a nugget is triggered through a conversation or, the A's higher A's was triggered from listening to your podcast. And I will literally go, I'm going to write the story about that nugget. And so if anyone is interested, I'm available on Substack. Every nugget is woven into, I guess, the 30-year kind of story. And there is a connect through them, but I'm releasing them one by one, and I'm finding random people reach out going, oh, Rhody, that nugget landed.
Yeah.
You read my nuggets? Oh, I'm so happy. So yeah, anyone that's interested, you can find me on Substack, Rhody Hill.
And I'll put notes in all of the descriptions so you can find it. Rhody, I've had a ball. Thank you so much for not only doing this. I love this
podcast so much. It really resonates with me, and thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
It's super fun. And Rhody and I did a prep session. We gas bagged for an hour. It was super fun. I feel like this is going to be something we'll get you back on for, especially exploring some of the other topics. So I'll be keeping an eye on those nuggets of gold because I have a feeling we'll be doing another one of these soon. Thanks, Rhody.
I'd love to. Thanks, Carlo.